Alright, so the Adder is a great mech. Perfect. Just look at this guy. But you know what? Might be a little bit light in the armament department. So let's just say that I come over here and I think Eben Jag has parts. Yeah, let's pull some of these. I want a missile pod and maybe 2 laser pods. Those are nice and simple. I should probably be able to staple those on somewhere. So I will copy that. I'll start off with the missile pod, which I think I could fit that right on the top. I'll just mount them right to those racks. So I'll start off somewhere near the middle. Actually, I'll start off at 0, 0, 0. That'll be exactly the middle. So first off, I need to get it up there. You'll notice that it has 3 different colored arrows, and that relates to each one of the axes that you can move it by. So I notice blue is the z-axis, and it needs to go up. I'm gonna guess 40? A little bit too high. Try dropping that down to 30. Maybe 27? Not quite. I can just keep fiddling with this until I find an appropriate height, which I'm gonna call it 27.25 maybe. .5. Yeah, that looks good. So I think the other axes are pretty close. I want to get it rotated first. So again, I'm going to want to rotate it on the blue axis. And I think that would be negative that I want to rotate it. So I'll start off with negative 45. A little bit more. Negative 60. Oh, that didn't apply it. It's still a little bit off, so try going to 61. 2. Yeah, that looks good. So it needs to go to the left a bit. Left is... That'll be a little bit tricky because it's both red and green. So I could grab this plane and move it around, but I'm trying to keep it to the numbers alone. So I'm going to go for red first. Go 2 on the x-axis. Make that negative 2. That's too much, so negative 1. Why is it clearing? It might be more of a half again. So go for 0.5. Yeah, it's close enough for my work. Or at least for this, which is just going to be thrown away and not actually printed. You know what? If I were to just throw it on there, that might create a little bit of a pocket that I wouldn't want. So rather than mounting it up there, I'm just going to drop it down. Not quite that much. Maybe 26.8. I think that's close enough to not really having any gap. We'll just pretend that there's no gap there. So for this pod, I'm going to use the arrows instead. So I'm going to go for the left side. Now the tricky part will be getting it facing straight forward. So I'm going to try to look right down the barrel of that flamer up top. How does that look? That doesn't look too bad. This one's a little bit weird because of its orientation. That's an okay orientation. Now I want to set it farther back, and I'm going to use the plane this time because I want it to go right there. Bring it down so it's not going through that rod. Now the tricky part, well, you know what, I'll use this right here as where I want to get it to. There, now I have a way to line it up. These are all separate pieces. If I was going to reorient this so that I could support it before printing, say I want to rotate that back, well, now all the pieces are no longer connected. So there might be a better way of doing this, but the way that I'm going to do it is I'm just going to export it as an STL. So now I'll open this up in Kitbashing, just because. It's actually where I do most of my exporting because of my printer. But because I exported as an STL, now this is all one piece. So I could then get it oriented however I wanted it, and then go through and manually support everything. Or just for the sake of throwing stuff on there for visual aid, hitting the auto button, which that is terrible. But for the most part, everything's already been covered. Feel free to watch the rest if you want. If not, then good enough here. So everything before this covers all of the concepts that I'll basically be using for the rest of the video. So everything from here is going to be more of the same. There is still some more stuff to be learned from it. The whole thing is the first time I've been doing it, so it's all learning for me. But for the most part, everything's already been covered. Feel free to watch the rest if you want. If not, then good enough here. So now I'll try doing the same thing, but with numbers this time. But I'm going to cheat negative 19.57. Or not negative, just flat 19.57. So I have my height. That'll at least save me a little bit of time. Now I need to move it to the right, which I forget if it's positive or negative. We'll try 5 and see which direction it goes. Yep. Now the really tricky part, because of the way that this is oriented, will be the rotation. I'm going to start with negative 90 on the Y. Okay, now it needs to come down on the x-axis. I'm going to call that 35. Just regular 45 too. Okay, this is trickier. I think I wasn't going far enough. Or it's just crazy. Control Z is undo, by the way. Let's see where 90 goes. Yeah, it's nowhere near where it was going. This just goes to show you that I am not an expert and have no idea what I'm doing. Oh, that's rotating on the Z-axis. Why is it rotating on the Z-axis if I'm grabbing the X-axis? That'd explain why I was having differing results. And that's rotating it on the green, which is why. Okay, whatever the problem was, not my fault. Because I said so. So we'll just call that a mission failed in terms of actually orienting it with the numbers. Might be easier with a simpler, or the model that's actually centered. So after the fact I realized, and it's pretty obvious, but the axes are locked to the build plate. So the reason why I was having so many problems with these changing their orientation is because X and Y and Z are always in the same direction. I was just changing the facing of the object. So I still needed to move it relative to the plate, but I was trying to move it onto a piece that is also not straight with the plate. So it was a little bit more challenging, but a good learning experience either way. If this was straight, it might have been easier, because then everything else would have been straight. So I imagine now I could come over here and say, move that over by 1 on the red axis, and it would be easier to do. Yep. But let's say this should be a little bit easier because it's not rotation. I need it to come back. I use that little corner as a marker. So I'm going to say green needs to come back by 4. Let's see how far that goes. That was the wrong direction. So it'd be a positive 4. And that's too far. So 2. It's like another decimal of 2 point. Now it'd be less. So 1.75. 1.6. I'm going to play around with the red because it's going to pull it back a little bit more. So take a shot, drop it down to 1.3. Just because it's going to be moving back. Red, I'm going to say negative. I'm going to reduce it by 1. So I drop it down to 4. Nope, I want to go the other way. 6. That's going to be another decimal. I might have gotten that in there crooked. I think I did. So I needed to come back just a little bit more forward. So I'm going to make this like 5.9. Just to bring it over on that axis a little bit. And then go to like 1.5. Is that the wrong way? It might have been. 1.1. Yeah. Looks like I got a little bit closer to the body on the left side, so honestly, I would suggest trying to use this because you do have Control Z if you have a problem. So I want to get it a little bit closer. I'm just going to grab that and pull it over a little bit. Then back just a little bit. I like where that's sitting. Well, just come forward just a little bit. If I want to be perfectly even. Is it that corner I'm looking for? No, that's why I'm looking at the wrong corner. So we'll call it right there. Doesn't look too bad. It's an abomination, but it doesn't look too bad. But there is the super adder. So just for the sake of doing it by the numbers with something that is squared up properly on its axes. What was your 26.8? Let's try putting that up to the same height. Close enough. And I'm just going to give it little shoulder cannons. Because, yeah, the adder needs more PPCs. Rotate. This should be simple. It should just be the Z-axis only. And I'm going to guess -25. That looks pretty close. So that's where I want it rotated to. Now I'm going to move it. Ah. I guess rotating it changed its point. That makes sense. To a point. Wish it didn't do that, but whatever. It's easier to move it than rotate it. So, I don't want to rest. I'm gonna put it on the left side. Well, I don't have to get rid of that little. Like that'd probably be the sensor. So red. I'm gonna go 6. Nope, wrong way. -6. There's probably an easy way to tell which is positive and negative. One more. Okay, why are you clearing? I'm gonna move it back on the green. Say -4. No, now it's positive. That does screw up my X just a little bit. So I could split the difference and call this 3.5. And this one 7.5. Still needs to come farther back. 7? $4.5? Now I'm going to focus on going all the way back first, so let's try jumping up to 7.5 on the green. And then I believe this would go up, so 5.5. And I'm seeing my alignment is a little bit off. So come back over here. And once again, rotate it by a little bit. Need to go positive, need to go more negative. So 27 degrees is the correct amount. Which now I wonder if I just come over here and I set this to 0, then I position it. Okay, that cleans up the axes a little bit. You know what? I think I was just dumb. The problem is that I'm aligning it to something that isn't square. But it's also close enough to where it needs to be, so I'm just going to drop it down. Well, actually not. I could use that flat plate as a mounting point. So that would be a mix of green and red. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zero out the Z. That doesn't help. -1. I don't think this is enough. Let's go to -10. -15. And then on the red, I'll also do -15. Oops. Okay, it does not want as extreme of a change. So it actually is mostly on the green axis. Let's jump up a bit to 26. So now I'll just move it down on the Z. Maybe a little bit more. Let's try 20. I'll go ahead and just call it there for the, yeah, whatever you want to call this at this point. Adder Mark 2? Why not?